All right, so one thing we like to do is all new members like to do some introductions so that we know who you are, so that we break the ice. We're all very friendly, so it's fun to get to know other people. And what we usually do is ask for your name, your occupation, and something that's not tech related. So this month, it's your favorite way to cool off from the heat. So let's see if you can do the little raise of hands in Zoom. You can see if we have, who's new?
I am. Yeah.
Go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, so my name's Leif, obviously in Salt Lake City. I work for Backcountry right now, and I'm doing a boot camp right now to learn full stack software engineering. And favorite way to cool off? Let's see. Probably like the Provo River.
Oh, nice. Doing like a float?
Yeah, just floating down that.
Very nice. I love rivers. That's a favorite way of mine to cool off too. All right, who else? Let's just jump in. If you're new, unmute and say hi.
Hey everybody, my name is Andy. I'm new here. And I just finished up a Thinkful bootcamp for software engineering, full immersion, and I haven't been able to mess around with much Python since that was just basically the Pern stack. So I'm just excited to kind of get back, have some free time to kind of sharpen up my Python skills, and excited to be here.
Fantastic. Well, I'll make another plug for our Slack channel. We're always looking for engaged people to go on there and add some content, ask some questions, answer some questions.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely utilize that.
Sweet.
Yeah. More new people? If you're new, we'd like to know your name, occupation, and favorite way to cool off. Oh, Andrew, did we get your favorite way to cool off? Did I miss that?
No, I totally forgot about that. Favorite way to cool off? Probably make the drive to the Uintas and hop in a lake.
Ah, nice. We have some cold lakes.
Yes, yeah. They do cool you off, definitely.
Then you'll be freezing.
Two new people this month. Who wants to make it 3? Going once. Going twice. Fantastic. You're both our lucky winners. All right, so our next section that we do here is who's hiring and then who's looking section. So on our who's hiring, we've been talking about a couple job boards. So PyCon has their job board. There's also this Python Jobs HQ. Tech Systems has jobs that come and go. Reach out to Kate. She can put in her contact information here, I think. If you want to learn more. Anybody else on the hiring front know of places or work at places that are hiring?
I got Invitae. I'll add the details in there, but Invitae is a genomics company based out of San Francisco. They are looking to hire purely remote software platform engineers and software engineers. So if you're interested in genetics, genomics, hit me up in the Slack and I'll see where we can go from there.
And I'll add in, you guys, Faris said this was his dream job. So sounds like it's a pretty amazing place to work.
Yeah, it's still my dream job. I love, yeah. I could talk for hours about why I like this job, but I'm not going to.
And that's
He's
so
gonna
cool
talk
that
for
you're
hours.
hiring.
Sorry?
I just said it's so cool that you guys are hiring. I mean, there
Yeah.
are so many companies in hiring freezes right now, so that's fantastic, Faris.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. We had our own hiring freeze, but that's been lifted for these projects, which will go unnamed, but I get to announce them in a couple months, and that'll be fun. So, yay! Anyway.
Nice.
Anybody else know of people hiring?
Yeah.
No?
No?
We
Going
also
once?
have the link on the Etherpad. So those are frequently updated Python jobs. And then, yeah, Kate is an awesome resource. She will never ask you if you're an iOS dev if you say you hate iOS deving. So
This is true. And I mean, the nice thing is now with COVID, so many companies are getting really open to doing remote work. And so not only can I look in Utah, I can look nationwide for anything that could potentially offer remote.
excellent.
Fantastic. Well, Kate, let's do another search for me soon. On the who's looking, so I'm looking. Hi, my name's Dylan. I do data science, Python development, and I've been doing it for many years now. Worked with Faris. He can vouch for me.
I definitely vouch for it. He has more talks than anybody else in our meetup so far. So, yeah, Dylan's a
Number
great
one.
presenter, very generalist.
Local meetup speaker. So here's my email and my LinkedIn where you can find me. Ross, do you want to give a pitch for yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm relatively new to the Salt Lake Python group. I just joined last month. It was my first meeting. I've got a strong technical support engineer background, and I've been on a personal sabbatical this year to transition to being some sort of a programmer, software developer, and currently going through that journey right now. And I'm looking for jobs.
Fantastic. That's cool.
And I guess it's not necessarily applicable, but my favorite way to cool off is by jumping in glacier lakes and rivers.
Glacier lakes and rivers.
The coldest of the cold.
I love
Yeah.
polar bearing. I used to do that up in Canada. It's the best.
There's no other way to feel alive.
Better than coffee.
It's like 5 cups of coffee at once. I love it.
Awesome. Good to meet you, Ross.
Yeah. Do we have anybody else on the who's looking front? Everybody happily employed or happily unemployed, whichever your choice may be. All right, let's get to some community news. So the PyCon 2020 was moved because of COVID. It was moved online this year, and all those talks are up and publicly available, which is amazing. Last week I started going through a bunch of them and just like picking and choosing topics that sounded interesting, and definitely learned some new things. And it was really fun way to like kill some time or like watch while I'm cooking or kill some time. And it was really, really fun. Python 3.9 is working its way towards a full release. We had like a point release 3.8.4 did a point release for security. And if you're not on Python 3, where are you at?
One thing
Here's what I do.
will say for Python, what you said about was we were supposed to burn a Python 2 effigy. That was kind of the big like in-person thing we were planning, and I was part of the little group, and it was going to be great. But we'll probably do it next year. Hopefully, we'll see.
We could make it much more violent because everybody's safely at home. So we should just set up some sort of camera system and have a big burning of Python 2.
That's true. Actually, we should go out into the middle of like the desert and just record something.
Yeah.
So it'd be like Burning Man, but not a man. It would be Burning Python 2, I guess.
Yep.
It is August, so.
Yep. From home with all the water you can drink.
Exactly.
Do you want to talk about the Python logo, Faris?
Well, I will say that the person who designed this logo is awesome, and he spent all the work and time to make sure that we have an awesome Utah Python logo that is approved by the Python Software Foundation, so we don't have any trademark issues. And then I am about to post the swag link. By the way, that's Dylan. Dylan did all that.
I did that. We have it as a GitHub repo.
Yes, it is a GitHub repo. If you could paste it in there, that would be great. I'm going to paste the swag link because very apropos 2020, we have face masks now that have the Utah Python logo emblazoned upon them. I made it a point for the masks. We get like a penny profit for each of these, so they are marked up, but that's just because of the vendor. So this one's like just everybody can get a mask, and then other stuff we do. Again, anytime we take any money, it's all listed in the link in the URL in the Etherpad. But we have masks. We also have what was the other thing I got going? We have a few things going on. So definitely check out that link and yeah, enjoy a Utah Python cloth face mask. Oh, and we also have die cut stickers. That was the other thing. So if you want to put an awesome Utah Python logo sticker on your laptop that's the shape of the state of Utah, that is now available. So that's what I got.
Thanks,
Dylan, you want
Faris.
to take it away?
Yep. For some reason, Etherpad wanted to freak out for a second there. All right. Our repo for that logo. Here's the mask. Super cool. I'm gonna get me one of these. All right, so we're also always looking for new talk ideas. If you're interested in giving a talk, this is a great low pressure place to do so. We often fit in either lightning talks if you feel more comfortable with 15 or 20 minutes, or all the way up to an hour-long talk, which we're gonna get from Faris today. And we have all of these different topics that we've kind of brainstormed and thought about. I believe the next couple months, we have some nice, exciting talks lined up for people. And then probably come November, December, there'll be a chance if somebody wants to jump in and present on something. It's a great way. I love giving talks as a way to learn something. So you've got 2 to 3 months, just pick something you don't even know and do a project in it and then just present on that. That works out really well.
I will say that's 90% of my talk today. So
Nice.
Exactly. This is par for the courses here. My talk is probably down here somewhere. So it's going to be awesome.
Yep, so upcoming, we got Faris today, PyCarrot, and Adi for operations research. These are gonna be great talks. I'm looking forward to them. With that, Faris, do you want to present on what you have learned in the past 24 hours? I mean, month.
It's funny because my talk is going to be pretty much a GitHub repo, and we're going to explore it with some notes that I already made. I would encourage people, I made some links in the Slack. If you want to follow along, I tried to structure this talk in such a way that you should be able to clone the repo elsewhere and then make your own with your own project name and kind of follow along. So yeah, with that, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Boom. All right. So basically, we're going to start backward a little bit. Who's used Postman before? And feel free to use like the raise hand feature on Zoom, and I can see it over here. Yeah, a few people. So Postman's great, but I stumbled upon this other tool called Insomnia. Insomnia has two parts. It has a designer and a client. They call that Insomniacore. The core looks more like Postman, but the designer is kind of awesome. Basically, it lets you design your entire API schema and real-time preview it. On top of that, if you authorize into this, and I hope I still, I'm gonna have, here's one thing that's gonna happen today. There's a token I need to keep pasting in here because I haven't figured out how to get some of this stuff completely locked down, but basically it lets you do stuff like authorize into your server or any server, and then you can pull up what you need to in the API that you just wrote. So today we're going to actually go through and create from scratch a Django project, but I pre-baked a lot of stuff. So this is going to be like a cooking show where, you know, there's going to be stuff that I already made in the oven like a couple days ago. So let's get started. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be using a lot of PyCharm today. And I'm also going to be pulling my notes onto this other monitor, so I'm not going to be able to see reactions. Dylan, you're going to have to ping me if there are reactions of any kind, or people have questions. And feel free to ask questions in the Slack or the Zoom, and I should be able to see those. Yeah, so.
If not, I am here for you.
Yes.
I got your back, Faris.
Excellent. In the Slack, I pasted a link to the notes that I'm making, or I'm basing this on. And the other fun fact I will share this week, and it might explain my cadence, is I have a 6-month-old now, and this whole talk, I don't know why I did this to myself, but I named it Insomnia, which is just my mood this week. You know, lack of sleep is definitely a thing when you have a young child at home. So with that, let's get started. And see, I'm still coding on this. So I had a lot of fun putting this project together. And basically where I was coming from was I wanted to make a Python 3.8 Django 3 project from scratch. And I don't have to worry about anything except making a good API documentation for it. And I found out that Django REST Framework does this for you now. It makes what were formerly called Swagger docs and are now open API docs. Let's keep looking at this guy. Can everybody read this okay? Or should I make the font a little bit bigger?
I think for me, a little bit bigger.
All right. All right. So this right here, this is an open API specification. And it looks, you know, fairly long and unruly, but what it's doing is telling a user for every endpoint, these URLs, we make a promise that if you do a GET request, you're going to get back a JSON object with the following properties. So let's take a look at one of these. Oh, and for context, I've had camping on the brain as well. So let's look at what components we came up with. Okay, so we got campers, campsites, camp hosts, campgrounds. Okay, and the idea is we're trying to solve a problem for camp hosts. They need to keep track of all of the campers in each campsite. A campground is just a way we're going to use to say a collection of campsites. And each camper can only be associated with one campsite. Is everybody following or not quite? No? What we can do is I can probably generate a diagram over here. Should I do that? I think I'll do that. So this is the Django project. And here are your models. So what Django is doing in here, in this case, is it's mapping a Python class called camp host onto a table on a database called Camp-Host. And what's really nice about this is that you don't have to write any of this logic to say, oh, okay, I have a camper that's associated to a campsite in SQL. You just write it as if it's a Python object relating to another Python object. So let's generate a diagram. So something nice about PyCharm is that we can generate a diagram for this, and I forget how, but there is a button. Yes, show diagram. So this is a diagram of what we're looking at. So we have a campground, and those have camp hosts, and that's a many-to-many field, so star to star. And we have a campground to a campsite, that's a one-to-many, and a campsite to a camper, another one-to-many. Okay, so we can imagine an object coming back from a campground that has, campsites and campers, or we can imagine a campground that has, a campground name and a camp host. So the goal is, my first goal right now, if we're going to be test driven, is to get to the point where we can spit out something like this. So we have the first campsite, and it should have campers, and it should be associated with this campground. Pretty nifty, right? So again, we're working backward. So if people have had a chance to look at the tutorial doc, hopefully, it's kind of a rough draft right now. I need to fix a couple links to some Git tags and whatnot, but let's look at what it would take to make this from scratch a little bit. I'm going to cheat. And by cheat, I mean I'm going to open a new project. And yeah, you'll see what I mean. So first thing, I'm going to use Cookie Cutter. And I'm going to use that to create a Django template. So let me back up, sorry. Cookie Cutter is a way to, okay, instead of having to do all this boilerplate code of, okay, I need to do user logins, I need to make API keys, I need to do this and that. People have solved this problem so many times that they've turned it into a template. And those are called Cookie Cutter templates. They're really great. Oh, come on. And sometimes things just don't copy on my screen. There we go.
To the people who made Cookie Cutter too, they just released a Django book too for I'm going to say Python 3.8 and Django 3. That's really good.
Is it PyDanny's 2 Scoops of Django?
Yeah, they have an updated version of it.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's very good.
So let's just go ahead and we'll do the Pied Piper web example for now, just to show how you could set this up on your machine. And then we'll go back to what I've named the Restless example. And that's also the name of the repo that we're using. So we'll do Pied Piper web. The app name is Pied Piper. So I'm just hitting enter on the command line, and these defaults are just going to go through. Email, why not? Let's just do the Pied Piper email. It's all about Weissman score. I just hit enter. Owner of this repo, I'll put in my GitHub. And what should happen now is I can now go an ls and I'll find that there is a Pied Piper web repo. And inside, let's do a tree. Inside, we already have a lot of what we need to get going, including a Docker file with a Django app. So this is pretty sweet. So let's go ahead and, what happens if you use PyCharm to open PyCharm? I wonder. I haven't tried this yet, so. Oh, it doesn't break PyCharm, that's good. Let's do a new window. So as you can see here, we have a Docker compose file. This has, a fake secret key ready to go. It starts up a web image. It starts up a documentation server, and it starts up a Postgres. So if you're following along on the notes, the next thing you'd want to do is do docker compose up -d. And this is assuming you did step 0. Well, it would help if I stopped my other one, hey?
I see a wait for Postgres script. I've written a few of those now, and I feel like that needs to just be baked into Django at this point.
You won't get any disagreement from me. There we go. So the wait for Postgres script, this is pretty much copy pasta at this point, but it's doing, well, actually this one has the environment variables too. I haven't seen that yet.
This does it differently than I've seen it, and I've done it.
And it has a movies, which is important.
Yeah, I kind of like, because I've just imported from Django and just said whatever the default connection is, wait for that connection to be valid, and then move on. And that's worked pretty well.
Indeed.
Then it's agnostic to database. That's a cool cookie cutter.
It is. This is a pretty awesome one. So as you can see, I did docker compose up. I had to do it a couple times because I didn't wait for this server to stop. Let me get a fresh Firefox window here. Come on. There we go. And you should now be able to go to localhost 8000, and it redirects us. And it says authentication credentials are not provided. And you're like, what do I do? Well, here's something cool about this cookie cutter. In the README, they even tell you, you know, these few steps to get started. So we did those steps, and now you should be able to go to localhost 8001 and check this out. You know, we have some initial documentation ready to go. Stuff about how we're going to authenticate, how, you know, users can register a new account. This is amazing. Yeah, it's a great cookie cutter. And I did leave a link in the documentation, but boom, so we can copy this. So this command, this is going to prompt us to create a super user, and I'll show you what this means. So that'll let us, you know, circumvent the security because, you know, we're running our own server. It doesn't matter. It's a development server. So I'm going to do Faris at example.com, and let's just. So I put password as my password, and everybody's going to hack me. But check this out. This is also a new thing in Django. So part of this was I haven't done a fresh Django project for a while. Django now has a built-in like password check, which is kind of cool. But I'm just going to go ahead and say, yes, it's okay. Password is my password. And now everybody knows, and it's recorded now and for all time that password is my password. So the next thing we can do is, now that we know my password, is we can go to admin. Oof. So this is already a bug. That / I won't talk too much about that, but there is a way to fix this. Go look it up. But basically, sometimes you have to add that / manually for now. And then password. And the other thing that everybody gets to see, because it's a token, and you should never show this on a public Zoom. Oh no, what have I done? But anyway, this is going to be our token, quickly. Come on, buddy. And we should be able to use this to get users. Oh, I see. So this is our token that we can use to log in. And what was the, let's see, let's do a quick example I was going to use, but that's all right. Oh, here we go. So if we wanted to test our API, we could use curl. Okay, so let's say we want to get all the users. Let's open an actual command line here. And mine takes forever to turn on. So curl. So there's the token. So curl dash x get, and this is just localhost 8000, and we'll say API v1 users, and I need to add a header. That's what the dash h means. And notice the shape of this header, and it's going to tell me that get is not allowed, which is true. So, you know, in the olden days, you'd have to go and reform and try to figure out, hey, how am I going to use this API? So now we have Insomnia. So let's just use Insomniacore real quick. I'm gonna make sure I don't have any work stuff on here. I don't. Well, I do, but you can't see it. Demo. So I have a demo folder here. I'm going to make a user create. Oh, wait, sorry. Oh, wait, I forgot. The whole point of this, I was trying to demo this. So we're going to copy this curl command. I'm sorry, let me back up. Usually what you would do is you would say, you know, localhost 8000 API v whatever. But because we have a curl command, we should just be able to paste it. And I think, yeah, I think this will send the header. No? I guess not. New request. Paste a curl command into URL afterwards. Oh, I see. Is it like this? Yes. Okay. So in this URL over here, I pasted that curl command, and our authorization token shows up. And again, this is the / issue. So get is not allowed, but let's turn it into a post. And we'll break it. And we'll say this field and this field are required. What are you doing? Oh my goodness. So we could add a body. We could say username. Dylan. Password. And we sent that post, and now Dylan has an auth token, and we have a 201 created header that came back. And that's great, all fine and dandy. But for this demo, I thought it was kind of boring to just have users, so I started going nuts, and I added some models. So let me see. Sorry, one moment. Okay, there was one small thing that I want to cover really quick before we keep going. So this is Insomniacore, right? So we're not basing this on any docs quite yet. Like we could add a description in here, and it's pretty awesome that you can, you know, do some styling with Markdown and then save it to Insomnia and then share that with a coworker. But if you wanted to make docs that anybody on the internet could use, you want to make an open API doc. You want to make a spec that is, you know, part of a standard that people are starting to conform around. All the big companies are using this, all the cool kids on the block. So Insomnia Designer, this is going to be your jam. So where do we get started with this? Well, for now, I'm going to rename this guy just real quick so I don't lose track of it to restless. And I'm going to show a trick here. And this trick is pretty much what started me on this path of like doing this talk in the first place. The first thing we'll need to do is, so as we did, you know, create super user, manage.py actually has a few commands. So if we did help in here, what's going to happen is it's going to start a server, and the only job of that server is to print out help, which is kind of funny. But it's kind of like that butter robot in Rick and Morty. But anyway, the only job of that server just now was to just spit out the help file of manage.py, which is a built-in Django command, which lets us do a number of things. But something that REST framework now comes with is this generate schema command. So let's do that. What happens if I generate schema on Pied Piper? All it's going to do, oh, it's going to crash. I forgot, because here's the first caveat. And I added this to my notes, I think. It's either a footnote or a comment, so it might not be visible. But there is one bug so far I discovered with this cookie cutter. Or there's two. There's two bugs with this cookie cutter I discovered. So here's the first one. So what you'll need to do on your side, if you are following along, is you'll need to run this. Nope. See, this is why I use PyCharm. I can never keep track of these commands. So I'm going to run it here. And then in the web, Pied Piper web, I'm going to start bash. And the reason for this is now I'm in the box. I need to pip install a missing Python module called URI template. So I added this actually in the repo. The URI template is now part of the requirements.txt. And we shouldn't have any issues now. And look how I can, access manage.py right here. I don't have to keep spinning up a server just to do that. And we're going to do what? Generate schema. And as you can see, on the output, we now have this giant schema. And what are we supposed to do with this? Well, first off, we can pipe it. And piping, it's just that character. Take whatever is on the output and put it into a file. So let's just call it generated schema Pied Piper. And you can just call it whatever you want in here. And this time, instead of spitting it to the screen, it made a new file called generated schema. So Pied Piper, right here. Pretty nifty. But, this doesn't let us preview it. So the order of operations I found to be useful is you generate it with the machine and then import it. And here we go. And it'll start a new workspace called import workspace. And notice we don't have much going on here, but we do have, our user post patch put delete, and all of these are already documented for us. Pretty fantastic. So then the next part of my experiment, I was thinking to myself, what happens if I add a bunch of models and add a bunch of serializers and Django REST framework stuff? And this is the part where I get to say, I already did all this, and I'm going to go get that fresh baked stuff, and I'm going to swap us back over to from Pied Piper to Restless project. So this is how you can get started on your own, on your side. But I would say feel free to use the repo, and you should be able to copy these models as we go. But the next step I did was I did manage.py. Well, I forget the name of it. It's generate app, I think, right? So manage.py, what is that? It's start app, okay. And I decided to do one about campgrounds. So I did start app campgrounds. And notice if this reloads, yeah, now we have this folder. And then the other thing I did was I moved it into the Pied Piper app. And that should be documented in the tutorial doc. But yeah, and that's great. And we'll get started with these models. So the next thing we'll do is we'll take some models, we'll create them and the views. And yeah, let me kill this guy. Are there any questions so far? I haven't checked the chat or the Slack. Dylan, any questions while I switch back to our more robust models?
I mean, I can give you lots of questions, but there's nobody else, no one else from the group. And my questions might not be very helpful. They might just be side tangents.
I see. Well, if we're going to side tangent, we're going to do it on, we'll do it on this repo. How about that? All right, so the difference between this and what we just worked on is, in this case, now we have this campgrounds with models that are actually written. And we took a look at these. We also have serializers, and we also have views. And these are actually view sets. So if you played with Django REST framework, you know, all of this stuff should make sense. If you haven't, well, let's take a quick look at it, but I encourage you to take this and run with it on your own. So what's a serializer? A serializer is just a way to take like any kind of structured data and turn it into another kind of structured data. That's all it really is. And in this case, for Django REST framework, the structured data is a Python object that is also known as a Django model that talks to a database, so we don't have to worry about any of that logic. And the serializer will take that model and convert it to and from JSON to the database. So what we'll do is we will inherit a model serializer that's coming from REST framework. And this is going to give us all kinds of like goodies that we don't even have to add methods for or anything. All we have to do is tell it we have this model, and these are the fields on the model that we want to show or to use. And I don't have a good example of that, but we want to be able to write and read to these fields. So the write part will get tricky, and there are a couple bugs in this already. And it gets especially tricky, and I haven't fleshed out all of the logic for you, but maybe we can do it as an exercise at the end of this. But it gets especially tricky for related fields. So what do I mean by that? Suppose I have a campground object that I want to send up to the server. Well, do I send up the representation of a campsite as well? Or do I just say campsite 1? Do I send up the camper as well? Or do I just say, you know, camper 3? So these are questions that you as an API designer, you have to answer. And an open API or a Swagger definition, this gives you the power to describe this in a way to other developers that should help them, you know, when they're designing their app. They will have an expectation of how your app will work as a result of this. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look. So we have these serializers, these views. The other step that you'll need to do is, let's open these URLs. And these URLs will, and you know, if we wanted to clean this up, we'd put these URLs in the campgrounds, but for now, I just added them to our routers. So now we have anything API v1, right, will now route to these router URLs, which are campers, campsites, camp hosts, campgrounds. So let's start documenting this. So if we remember, let's get our servers up. Okay, so our server's up. I think, yeah, so we're here. I should be able to exec bash. Excellent. So schema, that's my little one, if you can hear him in the background. So we're going to generate a schema, and let's just see what it outputs before we save it somewhere. So yeah, that looks like a schema, you know, and we have the campgrounds in there. So it's generating, so far it looks like it's what we're expecting. And so this is just one I'll make one off right now for this presentation. And yeah, this is saved, this looks right. The reason this is showing up as black is PyCharm thinks that this is a color that I'm trying to represent. I don't know, it's weird. Anyway, so now let's take this YAML file and we're gonna put it into a new Insomnia project. So import from file, and we called it what? We called it present. So let's go back to restless. Here it is. All right. And this is it. And here's our API. So how would you start debugging this? So you can see, there's a few spots on this Insomnia tool. We have the design. This is to design your documentation, but you also need to debug your documentation. Make sure that the promises that you're telling people are going to be usable. So we'll play with this in a moment as well. The test, I started playing with this last night. This lets you write tests in JavaScript once you finish doing debugging. You can actually share this with your coworkers as well if you wanted to go that far and do tests as like integration tests. But for now, let's just stick to adding some definitions in here. So first off, let's call this, I don't know, we're starting to show it off, right? And we have a v1, so let's call this 1.0.3 because Dylan had a look at this and I've made some changes since then. And as you can see, we already have that version coming in, and we're going to call this the Campgrounds API. And wow, that's pretty, right? The next thing we need to do is we need to specify how does one auth in to this API? Well, that's a good question. Let's look in the Django real quick to make sure that we understand how this works. So typically, Django REST framework has a few basic configurations, and indeed this cookie cutter Django actually has a lot of this stuff set up for us already, thankfully. And usually it uses REST framework authentication and then this token authentication they have. But this token authentication, it turns out to not have a compatible specification to OpenAPI. So if we wanted to make sure that we're writing an API that's compatible with the OpenAPI specification, we actually have to make some changes. And just for reference, this session authentication, when you see me logging in on the web server, on Firefox, for example, that's session authentication, right? We're saving a session cookie to the browser, and that's how we're doing things. But when we're doing stuff on an API, we need to use a token. And in this case, we're going to use a bearer token. And the only thing we're doing here, let me just show. This is possibly the most complicated authentication scheme you'll ever see. No, it's actually super simple. Basically, we need to send a header that starts with authorization, has the word in the value bearer, and then a space, and then has our token in it. So all we did to change this in Django REST framework was we made a new authentication scheme. We inherit the token one, and we just say, hey, in this case, the keyword's bearer. It's not token. By default, this is token. And I think I should be able to, yes, I like it when this works. So in PyCharm, I can middle click, take a look at this, and it's showing you, in their docs, and if you see up here, it's kind of convoluted, but this is the REST framework source code, and see the keyword's token. We don't want that. And this is, their advice for this. So, and this reminds me, I need to update the docs real quick, or people are going to get really confused, right? So it makes perfect sense on what we're doing. We're just changing that word to bearer. And this example needs updating. And instead of doing this stuff over and over and over, and instead of writing, a giant markdown file, this is great. This is fine for talking to a person. But if you're trying to make a promise to another machine, you need to use something like the Swagger OpenAPI spec. So how do we tell the Swagger OpenAPI spec, okay, this is how you auth in? Well, That's a good question. I am going to open my note on this and pretend that I Googled it real quick. No, I didn't. I have it right here. Come on. Schema. Okay, so bearer authentication, and these are the Swagger docs, by the way. I'm sorry if I'm getting too meta there, but these are the documentation on how you should structure an open API spec. And in this case, for open API versions greater than 3, they say, okay, you need to specify a security schema component, and it is going to apply however you want to apply it. And in this case, if you want to apply it to everything, just leave an empty array. So copy paste. And the only other note I would say is we're not using a JWT, so let's get rid of this. Boom. And we'll also test it real quick too. So we'll get rid of this. We don't need this bearer format. And let's see, bearer auth. And this we could call, Django bearer auth if we wanted to, as long as it has the same component name, the schema name. So, but for now, we'll just call it bearer auth. Let's see. So we wanted to test this. So let's get some campgrounds. Yay. This is what happens when you demo. Oh, I know what happened. So, okay, this is actually a great segue into another concept in Insomnia that's very important. We have this idea called environments. And basically, things that you wouldn't want to share to people, so like tokens, you can set up as an environment variable. You can make it a private one, for example. So we're going to call this, campground demo. And I'm going to copy this token over from localhost 8000. Hopefully that lets me in. Nope. Oh, there's that dang slash again. There we go. So here's the token. I grab this. Instead of having to type that over and over, I can use this trick. And I'll be using this in a moment, so I'm just going to set ID to 1. And now, if I want to use what I just defined in Insomnia, I just use double mustache or double curly brace. And I should be able to start typing that. And notice everything that I've set, it's available for me to use in here. And in this case, I'm going to say what token, right? I think this should work. I have to select my environment. There we go. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to add this. So I've been having issues managing these environments. I think there's a bug upstream because this software literally came out in March. So I'm just going to do this. And I'll put it in here too. I think this is the longest I've live coded without things going like horribly wrong, just somewhat wrong. Okay, so we could do either one. Of course, of course. Oh, it would help if I told it, the correct host. Localhost 8000, we're doing HTTP. We don't need to set the base path. And if we're curious how it's going to put it together, this base environment, that's the ticket right here. Come on, buddy. There we go. Okay, so success. So we were able to use our bearer token in the header to grab a bunch of campsites, but this is a campground, right? So yeah, so here's the name on the results. So we have one campground out of these results. Let's grab ID, which is 1. And if we were to do this, notice the first campground is now selected. Its name is Huffman Ports. These were all generated using a tool that I haven't gone into for this talk, but basically feel free to take a look in the tests. And I'm using Django factories to generate a bunch of test data. But back to here, so now we have a list of campsites that are associated, and some of these are tent, most of these are tent only. And here's the locations, and each one has a campground ID, and yeah, it's pretty awesome. So notice how this campground, this is always Huffman Ports, right? Because each campsite now has a reverse relation. Let me go back to this real quick. So what's another way we could test this? So I'm going to copy this, and we can test whether or not our authing in even works. So we're authorized. Oh, and there's one more thing we should do. We should tell people which servers in the first place they can use. So let me find my notes on that. So basically, we also need to tell our users, hey, these are the server URLs. And what's really cool about Insomnia Designer, notice when I paste this in, you can, oh, come on, yeah. So you can swap which server you're actually making calls to. So let's suppose you gave this spec to somebody, they could use this to select which server. So one would be with live data, one would be with test data. And for now, let's just do a test data server. But that's how you could do a list. And that's also, by the way, this is also listed in the documentation. So localhost 8000. And we're authorized. We don't need to do authorize again, because really what it's doing is storing it for us in the background. I'll show you what I mean in a moment. So let's find, so one of our specifications says you should be able to do a GET request on this endpoint, and all you need to do is give us an ID. So you can actually click this button over here that says try it out. Pretty awesome. So let's try it out with ID 1. And before we hit execute, or actually as we hit execute, so it'll tell us the curl command that you could also do. And you can study this to figure out, oh, okay, so it's sending my authorization bearer token upstream. It's making a GET request, and here's the URL. That all looks good. So hopefully, yes, we got a 200 back. And here is our response. This is pretty fantastic. There was very little I had to do to describe this documentation. And we can also play with what we're expecting. So yeah, are there any questions so far about this? Before I keep going, there's a couple other things I'll show, and then pretty much that's what I got for tonight. Going once, going twice, anything in chat? All right, no worries. Let's take a look at a couple more things. So the next thing, these are just if you want to go home and play with this, how do you do that? So first things first, go to GitHub, Octaflop, and I call this restless. And there should be, there's the documentation. And sorry. So what you would do is you would copy this URL and you would use it to git clone. And then you should be able to pull this down and do those initial steps I mentioned. But the reason I'm bringing this up again is if you go to localhost 8001, there's actually a tutorial button you can hit over here. And this will go through pretty much what I was talking about all night. You know, how to use your environment in Insomnia. These, apologies for these, I need to add these images back, and then that'll be great. Yeah, and I'm going to be working on this throughout the week. It was kind of my, hey, I want to play with Insomnia and REST and OpenAPI Swagger. Would people be interested, because I know that I haven't taken up too much time, but would people be interested in seeing how to write a test using JavaScript? Just give me a thumbs up in the Zoom and I can take a look. Yeah? All right. Oh, and bonus project for anybody who does clone the repo. For some reason, I can't get PyTest to work, but I think it's just because it was like super late at night and, you know, lack of sleep. But if somebody wants to get PyTest working, let me back up. There are tests in here. I actually am proud of myself. I actually wrote tests for once. It's awesome. It's just one set of tests, but these should kind of like show you what relationship you should be expecting. The other thing that you may want to take note of that I just pushed up, you can take this campground factory and you could just say, generate campground, and it'll go through and make like a fake deployment. So if you're playing with this locally, you're going to want to pull this, and then, yeah, and I'll add some docs about this. I got to this just now, and I was like, oh, okay, I should add doc. But anyway, let's go to, okay, so the trick to making these tests is ensuring that they work in the first place on this debug tab. I think there's a couple bugs with how the bearer token gets passed to this test tab. I'm not quite sure yet if that's the issue or if I'm just missing something. But here, let me show you what I mean. So we're going to get campgrounds. You know, we send this. Oh no, I have an invalid token again, of course. See, it keeps resetting. It's like, why? Anything else? No, that's it. Okay, so there. Okay, so we're able to do this. This is working. And we should be able to go in our test and say new, oh, what was this? This was for campgrounds, right? This is over here, this GET request. So new test suite, and I'm going to say campgrounds tab. And I should be able to do returns 200 for this. And what's really nice is because we have a defined OpenAPI like spec, I can do this to test my spec here. So let's do that. Boom. So what this is going to do is send this request and get a response, and we're going to check and see that the response status is 200, which means that everything is bueno. And we'll run this real quick, and I'll show some tricks with this. So here's, you know, we got a 200. Great, our test passed. Oof, our test passed on a live demo. I love it. So what would happen if I wanted to console log? So let's say I want to take a look closer at this. So I can console log response dot body. And I run and I don't see it, right? In Insomnia for now, and I think they're improving this, you'll need to toggle your dev tools. And because Insomnia is just an Electron app, you should see, oh, okay. I'm gonna do this old school JS style. So I'll say RESP. Boom. Yeah, so here's our RESP. Oh. So here's the body coming back. And I think, so earlier today, I accidentally deleted all these tests that I had. So I'm writing these from scratch off the top of my head again, but let's assert one more thing, just, and I need to practice JS anyway. And I know it's a Python meetup. What am I doing, right? We want,
Go home, Faris.
I know, right? Okay, body equals, anybody know JavaScript off the top of their head? See, I want to do this, but I'm pretty sure that's not right.
You can just start defining it, Faris. Just write JSON equals curly brace.
No, but you have to get the response, so. Body, I think it's not dumps, it's parse. And I don't think it's capitalized. Maybe it is. Oh. But anyway, you could do expect body to be, and yeah, this is why I hate JavaScript. So I'm not even gonna look at it. Let's just delete this. This is JavaScript.
Declare body as a constant or something.
Sorry?
I think
Somebody actually,
when you're declaring body there, you didn't place it as a variable or a constant.
yes, I did. You just weren't looking. Thank you, Eve. To be, what was it? Oh,
Just make it 2 equal. Just 2 equal it. Right?
well, I want it to be, and I think it's like object like that. No. Anyway, I don't want to debug this right now using JavaScript. I would rather write a PyTest, but you can see this debug. This is, I'm more than happy to debug things this way. You can assert that, this is coming out the way that we're expecting, where we're getting the campground object. We can even play with this. So let's take a look at this campground serializer just as a quick example. Let's have some fun with this. The new thing, by the way, Dylan, when Dylan and I were working together, we were kind of using an old version of Django REST framework that didn't have this. Have you seen this, Dylan? This depth? It's awesome. I'll get rid of it. I'm just going to get rid of this line. You'll see, where's my Insomnia? There's my Insomnia. So if I send this now, notice campsites are now just represented by ID.
Oh, so this is the side loading sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's built in. And I will note that there is one, I didn't do any write methods tonight because I'm pretty sure they'll fail in ways that are subtle that I haven't tested yet. So I've just been doing get methods tonight. But I would encourage people, that's an exercise to the reader. Try doing some, so that is to say, try doing some of these posts and puts. So let's try, if I was to do one of these, it'll say, no data. Let's say, what are you doing? But yeah, we can add depth to any one of these models now, and notice, these campsites are popping out. So that's pretty cool. When you do a create or a post, let me try doing one. Why not? Let's just see what happens. Yeah, we're JSON. Oh, something that's also really powerful, but I'm really annoyed that I lost this. There are instructions for this, though, in the documentation. Maybe I should just pull them up. I keep talking about the tutorial, and it's right here. Where is it? Ah, cool, 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 cool. So if we wanted to do some testing in here, we could actually, I'm gonna have to do some editing here real quick, but so we could do campground. And instead of like typing in JSON again over and over, we could say campground and dumps. So that's the other cool thing about this templating language. Oh no, come on, dump? Yes, okay. If you can use these filters that are built in Insomnia, and then you don't have to keep typing the same stuff over and over, but I don't think this will work. Oh, it did. Wow. I don't know my own spec, but yeah. So now we made ID 3. So if we were to go and get that one, we can test it here. Let's just say, if somebody figures out what I'm doing wrong with this, I would love to learn. But so you see how the ID keeps disappearing? Anyway, boom. So that's a 200, and we had a 201, which meant it was created on the last one. So any questions? Sorry, I kind of went along on that part, but I thought it was kind of cool.
I thought it was cool. This Insomnia is a cool tool, Faris.
Yeah, I think so. Especially as Swagger and OpenAPI is starting to become a thing, which I appreciate.
Do people so this was a pretty like, this glosses over a lot of details about web development, and if people had a question, I'm sure Faris could dive into a particular element, even like what is REST, or what are various options for authentication, or anything like that, if people have questions on those things too.
Yeah, the thing about these remote meetups is it might be hard to like step up and ask a question, but this is the part that's interactive, right? This is why we're doing a Zoom call instead of just putting up a video. So please feel free to ask me a question. Feel free to stump me. I like being stumped and not knowing the answer to a question. It just means there's more that I get to learn. So if anybody has a question, Matthew's like giving me an evil eye. It's like, oh, I have a question. I know I have a really tricky one. I'm gonna check this Zoom. Okay,
I'm
Ross.
I only know this stuff in past, like.
What is REST? REST is, well, let's back up. What's an API? Ross, can you tell me what an API is?
I guess like more or less like a set of instructions to do something, like a constructor.
Yeah, so an API, I like to tell people that if you were to suppose like you go into a restaurant and it was a robot, the menu is the API, right? It's a set of defined things to tell a server in a really specified like set of text, right? Instead of like verbally, hey, this is what I want. No, you have to format text in a specific way and send it in a specific way in order to get responses. So for example, if I wanted to get all the campsites on this server, then I would need to make sure that I'm getting the campsites path, right? And I would have to go and make a get request, which means I want to get a read-only kind of request, right, of these campsites. And I could send other information as well. Like I could say, I want to find or get campsites, get all these campsites that match a name. And REST is just a way to structure these objects in a really consistent way. So one big idea in REST, for example, is, every table, every object, it has its own URL, and every individual row has its own URL as well, like it has its own ID. And so if you wanted to create one, you would send something called a post request to this URL, right? So we have a get and a post, and this post request has all of these parameters that we're expecting to send down the line that we would have to send in order to make a new object on the server. But if we wanted to do a get, so for example, you could describe like parameters in here. So if we just wanted to get all the campers or all the campers who are like RV camping right now, we could say add a query. So we could add, in that URL, we would add a question mark, and then we'd say equals, and then RV true or something like that. So it's just a way to talk to the computer, or to talk to a server, basically. There are other kinds of APIs. A famous one is GraphQL, which isn't REST. And instead of coming back with like a series of objects, you're almost making a full like SQL statement and asking for objects in a really specific way. Whereas REST is, you're doing a lot of manipulation that JavaScript or the browser would do, versus GraphQL. Maybe that's not a great explanation, but yeah, it's a specified way of defining how you would interact with that server.
Yeah, the REST, you're sending just the request that has like the URL and maybe some parameters, and the server defines what format it sends it back to you in. In GraphQL, it gives the front-end user some more flexibility over what format the data is even sent back in. And the API layer, right, sits between the server and what a backend developer might work on, and a front-end developer JavaScript layer. And so like this sort of contract and this sort of tool is really good for those two. Like you might have some different teams or those separations of concerns where you could just define the spec even before you've written the API, and a front-end developer can go in and write up all the things that would connect to it, and then you can write your API on the other side that then serves the data back up.
An example of how we use this at my company right now, we have a server that has to talk to another server. Because of how powerful the Open API spec is, we actually generate a Python module from the Open API spec, and then all we have to do is use that Python module that a human never coded, right? Like it was just put together from this specification, and yet it can still make all of these calls to the other server because we told it exactly how how it should work. Another way I've seen this used, both at my current company and my previous one, is that you can use this to write your unit tests or your integration tests, sorry. So if you, let's say, wrote like a fake client that's trying to get a bunch of campgrounds, and like I'm missing campsites, or I tried to post with this certain thing and it's not working. Well, the Open API spec would tell you what to expect, but if you violate that, you would fail the test. So there's another example. The first case, what I described, that's the main reason you'd want to write an Open API spec, is that you could generate code straight from this. You wouldn't have to do too many extra steps. I will say, so a couple other notes, by the way, and this came up at my work actually last week. There are a lot of tools that will generate this for you. And the fact that Django REST Framework can do this now, that's awesome, but it's kind of a little bit behind. But I would say, let it get generated, but this header stuff, you should always be ready to edit yourself. Like, there are usually, like there is even in the schema generation, there's a way for me to add this to the code so I don't have to do it over and over. But I found that hand editing a generated API spec is much more useful for other developers, because you can do things like add examples. And there isn't a good example of an example, but let's take a look here. There is kind of. So this is one that's auto-generated, but let's say instead of, like if I wanted to make a camp host, I could use an example like name, Larry, and these kinds of campgrounds are what I expect from the example. So yeah, that's all I'll say for that. But it's a good question, Ross. There's no such thing as a dumb question.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
In Django, is there a good way to do authentication and authorization for these endpoints?
Absolutely. First step, don't write it yourself.
Yeah.
And then secondly, there are a couple tools. So there are different kinds. So the question was, are there ways to do authentication and authorization? If you're using Django REST Framework, I would recommend, So there are two different pages I would reference. So this authentication page is great, but also there is a separate permission. So permissions are authorization. So people are up to date on the lingo. Authentication specifically refers to whether or not somebody, like this is how somebody says, I am who I am, here's my username and password, or here's like my secret stuff, this is who I am an authentic, whatever. And then authorization is, okay, I know who you are, what are you allowed to see? What are you allowed to edit, right? I can't go and edit somebody else's Facebook page, but you can edit your own. So both of these concepts, having these under your belt, are helpful. Specifically, what we were playing with in our example is token authentication. So yeah, you even have, this is the header that we were previously setting. And my update that I did was just based on this note. So if you want to use a different keyword, just subclass. And that's what I did, is I made my own model, my own like Python class. And this Python class's job was to inherit the token authentication that's already written and just tweak it. So instead of saying the word token, we're looking for the word bearer. But it'll handle all this in the background for you. The other nice thing about this cookie cutter is it has some extra helpers to associate each token to a user. What do I mean by that? So, you know, we have, okay, cool. So let's say I wanted to make a new token. The whole point of tokens is that you could potentially track how much like each user is like doing. So let's say you had like an API for Twitter. You'd want to keep track of which user is making those calls, because if somebody's stressing out your server, you'd want to revoke that token, but make sure it's associated to a person, right? You don't want to just use somebody's username and password. So you just make add token, and I think, yeah, it's going to say a token with this user exists. So this is, it'll auto-generate this. But in this case, yeah, this was a batteries included thing. Like I didn't have to code any of this logic. And there's your key ready to go. Good question.
Traditionally, Django has middleware, which is essentially just a list of functions that it calls in every request. So, and in that middleware, you would stick like, check the request that's coming in, make sure it's a valid user, check the request and make sure it's not, you know, some sort of malicious attack. Check, you know, like you'd have just a series of functions and then it passes to your endpoint. And the Django REST framework just adds some of those middleware layers in for you to do the authentication. So you can do it. You can do it both ways.
And you can see this middleware in the Django configuration right here. And some of this middleware, you know, like this X-frame clickjacking one, nobody had to. You don't have to write this again. Django is the framework for professionals with deadlines. I think that was their tagline for the longest time. So instead of having to focus on all this boilerplate stuff, you can write your models and have an API like up and running. That's the point of Django.
Hey Faris, while you have that file open, do you have any reason why they made that a class and not a top line module for the settings? So my question is, they define all of these variables that are the configuration. Typically in Django projects, that's all just right in the module and not as a class object. But for some reason, this cookie cutter is making it a class object with the definitions. So it's just names, it's taking the namespace differently, and I don't know why.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is, maybe somebody else who's played with Django knows this off the top of their head as well. And I think this is why my PyTests aren't working. There's some cleverness going on with this configuration tool, and I don't fully understand how it works, but let me see. I'm gonna middle click this and see what happens.
Keep it simple.
Wait, is configuration new built-in?
Configurations look like some sort of added on thing there.
I know, but I went to go click it and remote sources, like,
Django configurations is an added.
oh, he's Googling it. Cool.
Well, it's just in the
Django
requirement.
configurations. There we go. Okay, look. So they're using, yeah. So I think what's going on is, so this is another nice thing about Django. It's been around long enough that people have written a lot of plugins for it. So here's another plugin that somebody used. So Cookie Cutter, it just sets up your Django project, but when the Cookie Cutter author was making decisions, I guess she or he decided, well, I'm going to use Django configurations. This is how I want to set up my configurations. So,
I like how somebody just, it looks like somebody decided to do inheritance instead of import star.
Mm-hmm.
So, and,
I guess technically this is the quote unquote right way.
I don't know. I guess.
Fortunate use of the, well, they're opinionated, so.
So the way people do it is.
Oh, that, okay, and I know why things so I've been having an issue. I try to run tests locally, and it's trying to use the wrong database, and I think I know why now. So that's cool. I think I know what I gotta fix now. Let's see if that. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but that's a good question. Yes, they're doing.
That's the point of the section right now, is to go off on a tangent.
Yes. Are there other questions? Yeah, see. Please use one of the starter functions. I think there's a bug with Cookie Cutter, how it's set up, but it's probably worth a PR for me. It's a great project, but there's always going to be, with open source software, some friction. And as somebody who's using open source software, it's up to you to contribute back. So I will have a PR hopefully this weekend for this, if I can fix it. I think I know what's up with this. I saw this yesterday too. Anyway, are there other questions? Any other discussions? Did somebody want to try something crazy? Do you want to try, there's one thing I do want to try real quick. And I want to try posting with a, well, let's get one first. Never mind. I was going to post with Unicode, but everything's just breaking. It keeps doing that. Yeah, anyway. Other questions? I think I've used up all my live demo luck, so.
All your live demo mojo.
Oh, right. We also got to do a raffle, right?
Yeah. We have a little bit longer. Are there any final web questions? Web development, Django questions? You've got several Django experts on the line. Ask all your questions.
Call now.
Call now. They're standing by.
Okay. If you are wanting to be in the raffle, you will need to join the Meetup channel in the Slack. Let me make sure. And I'll share that in the Zoom. So you should be able to click on that. If you don't have a Slack account, you'll need to go to the Meetup page and use that process, that button. But other than that.
And what is in our raffle today, Faris?
What is in our raffle today? Well, first off, I haven't had a chance to ship the last set, so I need to do that. Then I don't have anything. I just cleaned up my office. Oh, wait, here it is. Sweet. Yeah, I was going to do another set of pie badges. Whee. So, we'll do 2 of these. These are from Adafruit. Pi badges are awesome. Each one of these is a little light. And I should get one of these demoed up soon. But yeah, it also has little buttons. You could put a little game on there. You can code a game in Python. And you can kind of see yourself in the reflection of that screen. There's Leaf. A few more people coming in. And we'll do, let's raffle off 2 of them.
Which is it?
Oh,
200401 channel
sorry?
in Slack. What channel is it?
Oh, it's the Meetup 2020-8.5, and I will say, I'll put it in the general channel.
Erase you.
Okay. And I linked it in the Zoom chat, although I do know that sometimes links don't work in the group chat for whatever reason. Or you have to like, click them or something. I don't know.
Oh, I see it. You have to click plus on the channels if it's not showing up for you.
Ah. Yay. All right. I'm going to share my screen and I'll show everybody how I've been doing this because it's fun to live code and I've been doing enough of it today. So let's see. So Slack.
You're getting all your mojos used up, Faris.
I know, right?
You're testing your luck.
Everybody see that screen okay? All right. Great. Dylan's trying to race me.
I would say maybe take me out because I won the last time. I don't want to like keep winning stuff.
Well, do you want to just see what your luck's like? You can pass.
Sure, why not?
Boom. Okay. Random dot choice, and I'll say Pythonistas. You lose, Dylan. So close, yet so far. It's fun to race you though. All right, 3, 2, 1. Matt. Bravo. Send me a DM on Slack, and that's how I've been keeping track. So.
Okay.
And Leaf, yeah. Sweet.
Nice.
Or not me, the other Matt.
Yes.
Oh.
Other Matt.
Boom. Nice. All right, and then our next meetup is. I was trying to be fancy. This is what I got. There we go. So here's September. Next meetup will be on the 2nd. I will be making an announcement about that tonight or tomorrow. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining again. If you ever need Python advice or you ever want to talk Python, this Slack channel is a great place to do it. If you ever need professional advice or anything like that, feel free to DM me or message us on the Meetup group. More than happy to look at resumes. I'm more than happy to help with any kind of professional development and Python questions in general. So Thank you very much, all. I think I'll leave. Oh, I'm not the host this time, so I'm gonna hop off the Zoom, and then we usually have like a little network sesh after, so people can feel free to hang out afterward.
I'm gonna stop the recording now. Ready to do one last wave at the camera, and